Hey everybody, I'm starting up a new series. I have already done a bunch of the original Street Masters fighters, and you can find that on my other channel. For this channel, I want to go over everything again and just try to update everything for the brand new Aftershock content. Street Masters Rise of the Kingdom finally made it to the retail space, so it is just the Street Masters game with the core fighters, as you can see here. A few things have been updated, not a whole lot. One of the things that has been included now, if you did pick up the Kickstarter, is things like these overview cards that tell you about all the different fighters and what they can and can't do. Today we're going to focus on Kyoryo. As you can see, his complexity rating is a 1, which means that he is really easy to use, and he's actually the suggested fighter for everyone to start with on your very first game. He has basically the same types of moves and different things that other fighters have. You don't have to worry too much about that. You're not missing anything out by using him, but it's just, you don't have to think so far ahead in the steps of the things that you're going to use, and that's pretty much what makes him the least complex, and he can do a lot of damage, which is always great. Let's look at the basic card and see what this means. He's got 20 health, which is towards the top. A lot of folks are like down to 16 or less, and some go as high, I believe it's 22. 20 is a good number, and after only 6 power he will flip. It should not be difficult at all because he can generate a lot of power for you to hit that. And for his basic attack, he does fist or punch damage. What is the basic attack? It's called Channel Tempest, and it uses your basic action to attack for 2 dice, and afterwards you're going to gain 1 power for each Tempest card you control. Well, what's a Tempest card? I'll show you. All fighters have a flavor of tactic card, and for Kyoryo, his flavor of tactic card is Tempest. And one of the ones that I think is the best to get out early is Gathering Storm. As you can see, it also has a little star next to it, which means you can only have one of these out at a time. At the start of your turn, you gain 1 power. That is not when you put this out, it is at the start of every turn. And as you pull whatever threat cards you need to pull, this would be the time to do all of those at the start of your turn type things. If you need to organize your table in a certain way so that you can set up all the start of your turn things to be, I would say if you're using the play mats, put the one furthest to the left is the ones that start at the beginning of your turn so you don't forget. You can understand that quickly. If you don't have the neoprene play mats, then you can get the printable ones on Board Game Geek and just use that, or spray paint some. Be creative, do whatever you want to do. It also has an action which allows you to move 3 enemies 3 spaces towards you, since you want enemies to be within your engagement range to be able to hit them. And there are some area of effect damage cards in his deck. This can be very helpful, but you will be using your action up, which means you can't do your basic Channel Tempest. You also will gain defense tokens of your choice for each enemy. This is not taking them from the enemy. These are just gained because of the number of enemies you brought next to you. This will also help with your power generation and is a great reason why he has so much health, because you don't have to sacrifice too much. If you have other enemies coming at you, you'll be able to get hit and generate tons of power and be able to use that your other cards. Let's see what I mean by using it with the other cards. Another tactic is Riding Lightning. Again, this is a starred card, so you can only have 1 out at a time, but before each of your attacks you may discard 1 power to gain +1 red die for that attack. What does this mean? Okay, whenever you are going to use an action, as you see there with Channel Tempest, it says attack. If you have certain cards that you put out, some say ability, those are not attacks. But if the ability inside the ability said to attack, which I don't think they ever do, then you could use this. The other cards that are out there will say attack in the upper corner, the same as tactics as Tempest here. It'll say attack. Generally, you can use Riding Lightning effects for that. And at the end of your turns, this is when you draw a card, then you will be able to gain another power. So if you combine these 2 tactic cards, you're getting 2 every time, 2 power every round, no matter what you're going to do. Feint. What does Feint do? The other card didn't have Feint. This one has Feint. Well, you can move a number of spaces equal to your power. So however much power you have. Feint means that you're going to discard from control. So you have to have already played this card. It has to be on the table, and this will allow you to move. If you have 2 of these cards, one in your hand and one on the table, and you haven't played your card action, one of the cool things you can do is move wherever you think you need to move, feint. You can attack first one enemy or whatever you think you need to do, then do the feint and be able to move away out of range of an attack, out of range of Kimono's big, beefy movements, whatever it is that you think you need to do. It's a good way to get away, and then you can drop the Riding Lightning that was in your hand back onto the table and be able to pick up the extra power, because you will have an end of turn after you've placed that. So just something to think about. Where else can we use this? Let's look at another Tempest card. Or a Bakudan allows you to exhaust the card to do an extra attack. It does for 1 die, but because of Riding Lightning, you could bump this up to being able to be an attack for 2. And it does general damage and may target an enemy within 6 spaces of you, which is a ranged attack that is not very common in Street Masters. So this is awesome to have, to be able to do up to 2 every turn. It also has a feint, so keep in mind, what am I going to do with this feint? Well, I can exhaust it, then pump the power into that attack, then I can feint it and be able to dump as much power as possible. Now, if Kyoryo is holding on to some crazy amount of power, like 18 power or whatever, then this is your best option to be able to kill the boss, because it's going to deal direct damage, and it says you can discard any number of power, no matter who you're playing with or whatever the case is. Direct damage is insane, and there's a lot of bosses, maybe all along, some others depending on which version you're going to be playing against, that may have low HP, but they'll have high defense tokens. That direct damage is going to cut through everything. You could have a very, very short game by just pumping up as much as you can. Now, you can, like I said, exhaust, play, feint, then you can play another version of Orobakudan and do it again, but it would be really hard to do because you've already used up all the power. But if you had to split it amongst a couple of different enemies, whatever the case is, then that would be a tactic you could utilize to be able to do crazy amounts of direct damage and get in straight through attacking the boss. And how much power are you going to generate? Well, you're going to be able to get 5 if you attack with Channel Tempest in combination with all of your Tempest cards that are out, because you gain 1 power for each Tempest you control, and you've got 3 of them. So you have 1 at the beginning, 3 from Channel Tempest, and 1 at the end. In theory, you could be charged every single round without much difficulty. As you can see, it only takes 6. So what does that mean? What are we going to do? We've got 6. Where do we go from there? We flip this card and we go to the charge side. And the attack for the charge side will still be a fist. It does not have to be the same as the front of the card, but this one happens to be, so always look at those icons. And you will immediately spend 6 power. You cannot suspend and hold on to it. You have to immediately use it. So what does this mean? Okay, attack, and you'll be able to increase if you have additional power left over. Let's say you ended up getting to 7 instead of 6, then you can make it a 4 pretty easily. And it's going to be a ranged attack, 4 spaces, 3 different enemies. You can do a lot of damage to minions this way. Well, it says attack and then may target up to 3 different enemies. Does that mean I have to roll 3 different times? No, you roll 1 time. What does that mean for defense? Do I get 3-4 times as much because I rolled and hit all this other stuff? No. You have a set number of damage, a set number of defense tokens that you gain. You're going to gain fist tokens because it's a fist attack, and that's regardless of the number of enemies that you target. So it's 1 roll, 1 set of damage. It's going to be the same across. They're all going to be fist damage, and anything that you get, let's say you rolled 2, you got 1 damage and 2 defense. So you're going to get 2 defense, and 1 damage is going to go across to 3 different enemies. So hopefully that's simple enough for you to get. What's a tactic we can do with this? Well, once we've flipped to the charge side, all of those other cards are still going to be in effect, so you are going to be receiving 2 of your power, again at the beginning and again at the end if you have all those Tempest cards out, but you're not generating your power from the attacks. So you only want to do this if you've created a whole bunch of defense tokens. Chances are you're going to have an insane number of punch defense tokens, just because Kyoryo tends to generate that kind, because he has a lot of different attacks that are constantly going on. And you're going to just get yourself hit. You're going to get yourself hit so that you have 16, 17, however many defense tokens all turned over into power, and then you're going to unleash that into one giant or a Bakudan attack against the enemy. Hopefully you'll get some crits and it'll be some crazy amount of damage. That's the tactic. If you want to go that way, you would stay on this side, and then you would use the actions of gaining defense tokens, since you can do that as part of your regular turn, and stack those as best you can into being able to turn them over into power. This is just a great one-punch way to take out the boss, but you're also going to have a lot of minions rolling around. It's the type of thing that you might not want to do solo, because it's going to take so much time, and enemies like Wanbo, if you were anywhere near him, he's going to do way more damage to you than the 2 random defense token defend action will be able to keep up with. So mitigate how you use it, when you use it, that kind of thing. But if you're playing with a partner, or you have a really good ally that can charge you up really well, Hanzo is a great option for that kind of thing. But you got a couple different options depending on how you want to play in order to use a good ally to generate extra power. Hanzo, like I said, automatically gives an extra power every round, which will mean that if you do a regular attack, every time you do a regular attack on those rounds, you will be generating enough power to be flipped every single round if you want to. Chan Chan's great also in that she's able to deliver a random defense token, which will help you turn that into power. Lotus does something similar in that she does not have a attack, but she can generate 2 random defense tokens or peel 2 defense tokens off of enemies around her. And Lotus is from Brook City. If you picked up the Keys to the Kingdom, I believe is the location of her card. You can look on Board Game Geek and see whatever expansion set you want from wherever things are. And there's the great community there, and they've already broken down everything into how many card sleeves you need, where you can get various card counts, all that kind of stuff. And that's where you would find Lotus. There is also a stretch goal character in the current Aftershock. I'm going to show you that one. That might be an option if you don't want to use Lotus, if you haven't picked up Brook City or you haven't picked up Keys to the Kingdom. And that is Pux. He's a member of the Cybertooth crew. And if they start, let's say you are not watching this in 2020 or 2021 or whatever, and you're far in the future from me, we're recording this in July of 2020, that they've broken it off into a separate purchasable retail package or off their website, and that's where the Cybertooth crew is. That's where you would get it. If you're still in 2020 or whatever the case is, get yourself some stretch goals and you'll be able to pick this up because it was part of the Aftershock stretch goal campaign. He is able to move and do an attack. It says Pux and each fighter within 4 spaces gain 1 random defense token. So that's a little bit larger area for gaining defense tokens than Chan Chan is even able to do. But basically they do the same amount of damage and have the same amount of health. So it's kind of up to you where you want to pick that up. If you prefer Lotus to be able to remove cards, you just like the look of her, whatever the case is, then that's one thing. But in your regular package, I'm pretty sure you're going to get Hanzo as an ally no matter what if you picked it up. So those are your options for allies. I think are effective. You can use any ally you want. Nothing's going to stop you. And let's move on to some other cards of Kyoryo. So looking at some of the rest of his cards, we have found another tactic card. What's that? Yeah, he's got 4. Anyway, his allows you to do an extra attack, and it can hit ranged enemies, and you can discard extra power in order to attack additional enemy. And if you faint, you can immediately gain 2 power, heal 2 damage. Being able to heal damage is kind of rare in the game, and to be able to have an attacker like Kyoryo that can heal himself is pretty amazing to be able to do. It is a feint, so you're going to have to sacrifice having this card on the table in order to do that, but that brings your total up to 6 per round, which guarantees you to be always on your charge side if you're using it. Not only that, it gives you an action to spend on an attack so you can maintain your charge side. You don't have to use the action, like I was saying, for defense. You can if you want to, but it is a second option, and you can hit some extra enemies with it. Kensetsusen I've found to be one of the more useful attacks out there, because you can move the enemies towards you instead of you having to move towards them, so you can pull them away from your allies or whatever the case is, and it's going to attack each enemy engaged with you. So while you can move one enemy, you could already be around 2 or 3 others that happen to be there, and now you can hit 4 or 5, however many are around you, with that particular attack, which you can bump up because it's an attack. Sky Strike. Now it says if you are unengaged, so then you can move 2 spaces and attack. If you are not, or if you are engaged currently, don't use the card. That's just the way that it sets up. This deals general damage for each power discarded, which is less useful than specific damage, and that extra is not necessarily part of the attack. It's just a damage dealing after. And let's say you're able to kick and you're peeled off some kick tokens or whatever, but you really want to be able to remove some punch tokens, so you can pump in all the power you want to be able to remove those punch damage specifically from the enemy, because general damage, you get to decide what type of attack you're going to be or what type of defense tokens you're going to pull away until they're all used up. That doesn't mean that you can pull away all of the punch tokens and then be like, oh, well, he had 5 kick tokens left, but I pulled all the punch tokens and I'm just going to spend the general damage on damage. Like, no. You can pick which ones you use first, but you're going to have to use up all of the tokens that are on the enemy in order to have the general damage actually turn into regular damage. That can be a problem for a lot of the other fighters. That's not a problem for Kyoryo because he has specific damage on all these other places, and that's stuff that you can use extra. So that's nice to be able to have. And then we have a couple more utility cards, which are always nice. This is another attack, Eye of the Storm, so you can gain defense tokens by using power. So that's really awesome. Also, it is a grapple attack, which means you have one of each, punch, kick, and grapple, depending on whatever type of damage you need to do at the time. So that's really useful. Just keep in mind it is the only grapple attack that you have, so you're going to have to use it whenever you feel the real need to do so. And it will also allow you to pump up the amount of damage that you can take real fast. So however you want to do it, if you want to do the Orobakadon, crazy amount of damage getting done, or you have more objectives that are left to be achieved, so you want to use whatever power you've stored in order to gain defense tokens of your choice, so you can spread them out however you want. That is a really useful way to do that. You just have to have an enemy attack to do it. And Drawn from the Sky is an ability, so it's not an attack, and it allows you to get close to some enemies, and as long as you're within 4 spaces, you can gain 2 defense tokens from each enemy, and also heal based on the number of enemies around you. So if you have some extra ability from a partner or from a loot card, maybe some point you can pull that allows you to put a bunch of cards into play or do extra actions. You can chain these all together and get crazy amounts of power, defense tokens, healing, and do damage to everybody around you in crazy storm-laden lightning ball dervish kind of action. Now, is there anything else you can do with Kyoryo? Sure, he can be an ally or an rival, depending on what it is that you're playing at the time. And he is, I believe, the only ally that can gain power, and that gives you a mini version of him. He does not have a lot of health, that's just the way allies go, but he's able to discard power that is on his card to deal general damage, and he runs around and does up to 3 attacks, which is nice to be able to have as extra. As a rival, he also does 3 attacks and has a greater amount of mobility based on the number of defense tokens he has. So you're going to have a little bit of his personality in that he generates a lot of defense tokens as a rival, and a little bit of his personality of being able to utilize power to help you out as an ally. And depending on who it is that you like having in your game, maybe you're playing through Megan's story or Natalia's story, and you just like having Kyoryo around to help them out, then by all means use these allies and rivals. And if you're deciding to fight against Kyoryo, maybe you want to have the master being usurped by the apprentice and have Kyoryo being taken on by Hanzo in his hero fighter form, then go ahead and do that here as well. You can set the stories up, they're modular, you can do whatever it is that you want, whatever feels good about you playing, and he definitely will make it interesting. And if you leave him on the table too long as a rival, he gains random defense tokens constantly, which gives him more mobility, and he'll be pelting you with 3 attacks every single time. So it's a really good idea to have you take out whatever rivals you can first, because of those types of special abilities that pop in. They can definitely ruin your time out of nowhere. Speaking of stories, he's got one. So what does it take in order to get his story started? Not a whole lot. There's no requirement of what mission, so you can put it in at any time. You're just going to have to put the Storm's Disciple into play and Hanzo as an ally. You get an ally pool, so you'll see some cards that'll have like story pool, and that's where you put all the cards like these into that section so that you can segregate them out and be able to use them as you go through the next level of the stories. What is the Storm's Disciple? It starts with 10 power, and then you can keep exhausting it to pull some of that 10 power off and give it to Kyoryo. This will help you do crazy amounts of hits. However, you might not want to fully utilize the Storm's Disciple card. It may end up problematic, and you may end up with a penalty. So as you can see, if things don't go right in his story, you might end up with Crash Course, in which case every single time that you activate, as this is in your threat area, you will be discarding a defense token or a power. So this is going to weaken you. You can play through the stories. They're modular, just like everything else, in any way you want. I suggest going through and playing 2 fighters. I always like playing at least 2 fighters. I think that there's some synergies. They bounce off each other, and it's just more fun to play, even if I'm playing alone. But the requirement of being able to see the penalties that come in and the perks that come in, they make the game either easier or harder as you go through, in addition to things like rivals. And those story cards themselves have been tuned as like the Rise of the Kingdom story, or every single expansion comes with its own story. So whichever one that you want to utilize. Pestilence comes with the stretch goals. It was the Halloween themed zombie missions. That's one that has its own story that goes along with it. However you want to slot these in, you're going to be tuned to get stronger as you go through it. And you're going to be penalized and get weaker as you go through it. And every single one of those missions themselves in the story are going to have some type of card similar to Crash Course that's going to be a penalty. So what I would suggest, and I find the most fun, is just playing through the hero stories first, and you're going to be getting bonuses. Pick any hero story you like. Kyoryo is suggested as the first character, but you don't have to go through him as a first story, but he's suggested as a first character. If you think he's the coolest one, you looked at all the different fighters and you found whatever the coolest looking one was, then play through that one, because it's going to be easier for you to play more if you are playing with a character that you think is awesome. And then you're going to start understanding who their story is by going through and playing through the missions with them. And you'll find out more about them, what motivates them, maybe where they get their powers from, and you'll enjoy it more. The modularity of the game can make it difficult to keep track of the stories as you're going through them, because there's so many different parts coming from so many different places. I would say your first couple going through, just play through the hero story that you think is coolest, then add in, say, Rise of the Kingdom and whatever other story as you go through it. And it is up to you whether or not you want to keep an upgraded card in your pool or in your deck or whatever you want to do, or if you want to revert back to the regular normal cards after the end of the story. Now, what am I talking about upgraded cards? Let's take a quick look at what some of those might look like. Let's say you win the mission that was combined with the prologue. Well, you're going to add Hanzo as an ally, Storm's disciple, into the story pool, and you're going to take 2 upgrade cards. Well, what does an upgrade card look like? Well, it looks like these. As you can see, Orobakudan, they appear. There's 2 different ones. One has a gold rim with the little upward arrow on it, and the other one doesn't. Well, what does this upgrade mean? There's only going to be one upgraded Orobakudan in your deck. And there's a reason for this. It's because you're supposed to remove one of your regular normal cards and replace it with the upgraded card. This keeps the timing of your deck consistent. If you didn't do that, then you're going to be watering down your draws, and it's going to be harder to cycle through your deck and get other cards. So you're definitely going to want to remove it, and then you can put the the regular card, the one that hasn't been upgraded, you can stick that in the story pool if you want to keep track of things, if you want to put them back in, or you can do what I suggest and keep it as a reward for your having gone through their story, and it will encourage you to go through all of the character stories. The game is modular enough to where you can add rivals, which I think is more fun to have, and it keeps a variety inside of each deck, so that when you do find those upgraded cards, you're going to be excited to see them pop up, and it's going to change the way that you utilize your deck against the enemies, because you're going to know those characters pretty well after you've utilized them so much playing through their stories. You're going to know when you want to use certain upgraded cards, or maybe you'll feint them out for different effects. And as you can see, you get a little bit extra range, you get a little bit extra ability to stick power into more damage, and that's why you upgrade them. They're a little bit better. They're not going to break the game or anything like that, and I think they're very good. If you lose, you still get some upgrade, so don't worry about that part. You're just not going to get as many as if you had won, and as you can see, if you lose, that you had to put the penalty into place. And what is the thing that you need to do in order to lose? It isn't necessarily to get killed by the boss. It is to not satisfy the condition. So in green, it says that Storm's disciple has to remain in play. So if you lost it for some reason, then you would go to the negative side. You've been used up. And you can still win the match or win the game and lose the story, just like you can lose the current game that you're in and still win the story depending on what happened. So there's a bit of variety. It's interesting, different things you can do. And if you did buy all of the new stuff, if you got everything that came with the Aftershock group of items, then you're also going to get things called showdowns later. So I say it's great to be able to keep those little rewards in your deck. But if you want to play straight by the book, you're supposed to replace all of your upgraded cards back into your to deck with the non-upgraded ones and keep them separate. But that's up to you. I think I've covered Kyoryo pretty well and gave you a lot of information for new players. We're going to continue to try to go through all of the core box stuff and update the new information for everybody. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to throw that in. I have a different channel, and I'll leave a link to that. You can probably see it at the end where it'll have the latest episode. And you can go there to get news on all the Kickstarters that are currently going on right now. I try to put as many RPGs and regular tabletop games together so that nobody will miss out on anything that's popping up in the crowdfunding space. And if you want to stay informed with that, go ahead and subscribe there. Subscribe here if you want more of these kind of games that I'm putting on this channel with playthroughs and in-depth analysis on each of the different things that I find enjoyable. And that's the only reason why I do this, is to be able to show other people things that maybe they'll enjoy as much as I do about these games, and hope everybody plays together. You guys have a good one.